Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
One of the things I love about being a minister or having the name of a minister is sometimes people tell you things that they wouldn't normally tell you. So I met this gentleman, and he was telling me about an experience in his life. He was a professional, led a good and decent life, but he started drinking too much. And there was a night where he had been drinking too much, and apparently he didn't get into the details, but too aggressive with his wife, and he was arrested, which was completely out of his world view, and was put in jail for one night. And he said it was the scariest experience of his life. And he said what was interesting to him is that he was not at all religious, not interested, didn't think about it in his adult life, but when he got put in jail, he said the first thing that came to him was the Lord's Prayer. And that hit me. It's like he learned that his parents had taken him to church, so he got exposed to the Lord's Prayer. It didn't have any impact on him, and yet at that scariest moment where he was afraid and survival, the first thing that came to him was the Lord's Prayer. Not a prayer of like, help God, even that, but a prayer that he had learned as a child. I think that's significant for us. So one of the things I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about prayer in general first, because it informs how I'm going to approach the Lord's Prayer, but also how we approach prayer. We are a house of prayer. So the Lighthouse, one of our foundations, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is prayer. And so it's very important or helpful. Important means like you have to do it, but it's helpful to look at our own life and our own history around prayer. We know that we have two minds humanly. We have our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. That Lord's Prayer came from his subconscious mind. It's not something he thought about. It's not anything he nurtured or brought into his adult life, and yet it was solidly there as his subconscious life. So I'm going to have two invitations this week, and the first one is for all of you to look at your own childhood history with prayer. Whatever it is, you might have, and it could be multiple things. You could have all positive, all negative, all neutral, or a little bit of everything. But the idea is, and I don't want it to go into your thinking about the prayer. It's not about the theology, because no, in that moment he wasn't thinking about theology or do I believe in God. It was this thing that came from him organically. So look at feelings. When I say we're going to talk about prayer for 4 weeks, how does your body respond to that? Is it open and excited? Is it like, oh, it's kind of a bit boring, or, ooh, just see. And as you're looking at, if you went to a religious organization as a child, what was prayer like there? How did it impact you? And maybe in ways that you don't know. We know children are sponges. They carry, so there's things that we pick up. I remember learning the Lord's Prayer at church. I can't tell you how. I don't know how I knew it. We had Sunday school at my church, so we didn't even go into adult church. Now, I did sing in the junior choir, so I was in an adult church once in a while. But somewhere along the way, I learned the Lord's Prayer up until 6th grade. I don't know how. And so that's part of it. Like, we pick things up when we're children. So and I say that because I think I have thought a lot about prayer, and yet this past week, thinking about that story of how his childhood prayer, I started thinking about my childhood around prayer, and it was all these little things started showing up that I never thought about before. So it always surprises me that even if we've thought about something for a long time, just to go back with the intention of what did I learn, how does it impact how I hear about prayer in my present day. I'm not asking us, this is not a big healing journey. If you want to go and heal things, you can. But the idea is, as we're going through prayer now, are you open and available, or is old scripts running you about prayer? Or old ideas, and is there a place where you can just let that go and be open to Spirit? So that's the first invitation, is just to check in with yourself about your own, plus it's just interesting. Aren't you the most fascinating topic to yourself? You are an interesting person. Talk to yourself about prayer. So prayer, I'm going to share a little bit about things that have informed my understanding of prayer, because that's how I'm going to be approaching the Lord's Prayer. So I grew up in a church, a liberal Protestant church, United Church of Christ. As I said, we did the Lord's Prayer in adult church. I don't ever remember doing it in children's church. We call it Sunday school. I stopped going to church regularly after 6th grade, so whatever I learned up until then. So the way I was taught about prayer in this very liberal Protestant church was just pray from your heart. Just talk to God, whatever's in there. So I never knew people had formal prayers. I just talked to God. And I didn't have, like we always say, well, it's not the old man in the sky. I never learned an old man in the sky. I'm not sure where that imagery comes from. If it's in the Bible, I know many of you know the Bible, but I love you. I'm genuinely interested where that shows up. Because it's a father, but it's not a man. It's a father, which is the idea. So I had this energy. It was just the sky around me, and it was love. It was wise. It was tender. It was everything. It wasn't missing anything. And so I would just talk to God at night. It was about relationship. The thing I was taught in Sunday school, for which I'm forever grateful for, was God loves you, God loves you, God loves you, God loves you unconditionally. It doesn't matter what you do, say, think. God loves you, God loves you. And I believed it, so I would at night, if I felt like I wanted to talk to someone, I'd talk to God. I had no formal, sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. I didn't sit at a bed, I didn't say any formal prayers. That's all I knew what prayer was. I also happened to grow, so that informs me in this process, because first and foremost, trust yourself. That was one of the greatest gifts my church gave me, which is to trust my own relationship with God. I have noticed as I've grown, often we look to other people as our authority. So as we're talking about the Lord's Prayer, no one has authority about how you feel, about how you want to create your prayer and how you want to pray to God. No one is a better expert on it than you, because your heart is the expert. So that's how we're approaching this, is you find your voice and your way, and might be, so I rewrote the Lord's Prayer for myself years ago. Michelle just showed us her version. It was beautiful. That's her version. It's beautiful. The things that I've been reading this week, great stuff. But it's none of it, it's like, but I have my version, and to own that. So just want to say that that's how we're approaching the Lord's Prayer. Own your own truth. One. The other part that I was raised with was, that was fairly significant, is that my dad was an atheist and my mom was an agnostic. The reason why we went to church was she was hedging her bets, like just in case. And she said that. She said, well, I don't know, but just in case if there is something on the other side, I want to feel like I did at least brought my children to church. So praying for things was not something that I was raised with. If you want something, you make it happen, period. And in fact, I would say my parents' values were right in alignment with each other. And I would say that I think appalled is too strong a word, but there was this, like, the idea that you would turn to a God to do something for you that you could do for yourself was just like, no. So I didn't pray for things very often. Once in a while I did, but I just grew up in an environment. If you want something, you make it happen. And I could say, I had an environment that allowed me to do that, but neither of my parents had an environment like that, but they made their life successful and achieving. So it's not necessarily based just on the environment, but this intention. I just have to tell a little side story. I don't even know if it's important, but it makes me laugh because it's so my mom, and I want to share my mom. She told me this story. She said, I know I was a young girl about in 2nd or 3rd grade because what I was wearing. She said, I was walking to school. I looked down. I had saddle shoes on. I had a brown checkered skirt. And she said, I was walking to school, and I just stopped. And she said, I just had this realization. She said, you know what? The world doesn't owe you anything. Anything that is going to happen in this world, I have to make happen. She goes, I don't know where that came from. And I'm like, that was so my mom. I'm going to make it happen. And she did. She was like generator of getting things done, and she just never waited for other people to do it, and she continued to grow and expand her entire life. An amazing woman. So prayer the purpose of prayer in terms of getting things was also an anathema for me. What prayer was for me was about relationship. It was a communion between me and God, talking to God. That's all what prayer meant for me. When Neil Donald Walsh came out, that Conversations with God, I'm like, why do I want to know his conversations with God? I have my own conversations with God. Thank you very much. So it was about relationship. Years later, even before I heard of New Thought, I read a book, Power of Mind. I learned about affirmations and visualization. I created a life that I wanted, that I thought I wanted. It was a dream, and it happened. I worked. It was like, it works. The power of mind is amazing, and I used it. And I used it intentionally and creatively, and I made it into an acting school with 0 acting experience. That is power of mind. I mean, this is American Academy of Dramatic Arts. They go from city to city auditioning people. And so they were going, and I don't know how I do know how I got in there. I used the power of my mind. So I understood the power of mind. I understood the power of affirmations. I understood the power of visualization, but it never made me feel closer to God. It was just, again, this childhood thing of you make it happen, and I made it happen. I learned about my mind, and I used it, and I got stuff. This is important. I've had a very tenuous history with prayer. Because for me, I'm still hearing prayer as a form of, it's to get things. It's to manifest things. And for me personally, that wasn't enticing. So prayer wasn't enticing to me. This is really my confessional. I've just decided that's... So when I started on the spiritual journey and I learned about meditation, that got me excited. Because these first it was Joe Goldsmith, and it was Paramahansa Yogananda, Shunryu Suzuki, Michael Beckwith, and Ramana Maharshi. Those are my main meditation teachers. And what they're teaching is their oneness and union in God. Like that, I'm like, oh, that's what, they didn't have, what's one bad part of a liberal Protestant church is there was very little spirituality in it. A lot of stuff, but it wasn't too spiritual. So I didn't even know what a spiritual journey was until I started coming to New Thought churches and learning about this meditation. And so for the 18 years, I gave myself to these different practices, full on. And it was everything that I was, oneness and union in God. This is what I've been longing for. This is that relationship. I always wanted to get closer and closer. And then I'm hearing from Yogananda, self-realization, where you become it, where it's flowing in through and as you. You're the infinite, vast, oceanic presence of pure spirit, and it is every atom and cell of your being pouring into you. You can't help but express and ooze it because it's overflowing as your being. This is life. Yes. And so, isn't that awesome? That's why we're here, right? So we love this oneness and this power, and so meditating, and these different, so there's basically 4 forms that I was doing over these 18 years, and I can give testimony. These practices work. I mean, sometimes you have spiritual experiences because they just happen. But meditation is a way to, as Richard Baker said, makes you accident prone. They start happening more regularly, more frequently, and they work. So if you are interested in opening into this much higher sense of your I amness beyond just your body-mind, find a meditation practice that resonates with you and give yourself to it. Really give yourself to it. It works. And it works indiscriminately. It doesn't have favorites. It responds to how you are practicing. Ken Wilber actually is an example for that for me because he had no spiritual inclination personally. He was just curious about meditation. He was just doing it purely out of experimentation and was achieving these higher states of consciousness just by following what they were telling him to do, and he just kept growing and expanding. And I like that because sometimes you think, well, maybe you have to feel all this stuff. You don't. Just do what they say. It works. And it doesn't work just when you're in meditation. It'll just sort of starts popping up in your life. But something happened as I'm doing this 18 years, and I'm trying different meditation practices because even as I'm beginning to have, so here's the ideal of meditation. You keep doing it, you start having experiences, these expanded states of consciousness. And all the different practices give you there's subtle differences in each one. But the idea is if you keep doing it, you don't just have experiences, you can start sustaining that expanded state of consciousness. So it's not just an experience, but it becomes more and more a way of being. And something started to dawn on me after having all these experiences was I didn't want to take that next step. There was no practice that I had been learning that grabbed me and said, I want more of that. I want to keep doing it so I can live in this expanded state of consciousness. And that was very confusing to me because that's the one desire I knew I had since I was a kid. I wanted to get closer to God. Here I have been given these tools. I know they work, and if I just keep working it, I'll get to this expanded state. But I didn't want to. And that's when I went into this very long, dark night of the soul. By the way, there's no entrance sign that says you are now entering the dark night of the soul. So I didn't know I was going to the dark night of the soul, but suddenly I found myself in the desert. It's not a depression, it's just a desert. And because I knew spiritual practices work, but I didn't want it, and that's all I'd wanted my whole life, and now I'm like, now what? And the greatest thing about a dark night of the soul and that emptiness is it creates a space for something new to come in, a new awareness. So it was after being in this for 2 or 3 years, however long it was, someone just handed me this book, the Brother Lawrence, Practicing the Presence. I'd even talked about the book. I knew what it said, but I was in a different space now. I was open, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh. But I still didn't quite get it. And then someone handed me a book about these monks on Mount Athos. They're Eastern Orthodox monks, but it was not a book about theology. It was a book about their way of life and their practice. They say this prayer over, it's called the Jesus prayer, and they say it over and over and over. And I wasn't like, oh, that's a practice I want to do, but the result was like, that's what I've been looking for my entire life. You just like that moment when you know it, like that's it. I've been doing all these practices, and it's not that it's better than any other practice. We all are called. We all have a different calling. And for me, that was that hit me. That's it. That's my calling. This is the path for me. So, and it's interesting because I found it just as I started the Lighthouse, or God started the Lighthouse as all of us. And so I'm looking at this, and so for the last 11 years, I've been playing with prayer and all different types of prayer because it's still new to me. I mean, treatment, I understand treatment, but really how it is a path of transformation. What is it about it that grabs me in a way that meditation wasn't? Like it's been this extraordinary exploration. And as I was exploring, we lost our space in 2015. So we had to find a space. So for years, we went to 5 different places. Our beautiful board just kept us going as we went from one. I mean, because anytime you switch spaces, you have contracts and buildings, and you have to work everything out. And this is just a constant way of being. We're just like this. I like the way Reverend Michael puts it. He says, we're a mobile blessing unit. We're just wandering the Tri-Valley area, finding spaces to do our services, and you have to find a space to do classes. So it was during this period that I live around here, and I was just going for one of my walks, and I noticed there was a little kid's shoe over here by the St. Francis statue, and I went over to pick it up, and I realized there's a lot of kids' shoes, and someone had made this little labyrinth out of shoes and pottery. And I go, oh, a labyrinth. So I started walking the labyrinth. And it's right by St. Francis, and I noted him, and I have experienced his presence once or twice before, but I didn't grow up with saints. It was nice, but I didn't think much of it. As I'm walking the labyrinth, and some of you know the story, but we're setting this 4 weeks up of prayer. He whispers into my ear, it's time to start building. And I said in my head, build what? And he said, a house of prayer. 3 months, there's a church that was using this space. 3 months later, that church left and we moved in. That was 5 years ago last week, on April 7th, 2019. We moved in here. It was suddenly made available to us. And I knew that prayer had to become the foundation of our community. And so, I had an aneurysm, COVID happened, a lot happened. But we have this wonderful Lighthouse prayer team now. Last week we had our second annual prayer retreat. It was off the charts. Amazing. You know when you've been called. They gave me this little... Here's the cool thing. Reverend Kathy found us our retreat center last year when we went. And we were just looking for a place that was convenient for all of us. We heard about San Damiano up in Danville. Like, oh, that's close. Good. We didn't know, Kathy and I didn't know when we went there, it's a Franciscan retreat center. We were surrounded by St. Francis. The beautiful prayer team bought me this wonderful St. Francis, and so I just have him out here to bless us here this morning. And I don't know much about St. Francis, and his presence was so strong last weekend that I just bought a book, and they were just saying prayer, for him, the beginning and ending of everything was prayer. And you can do anything, but if you're not immersed in prayer, then you've missed the boat. And I thought, wow, I didn't even know that prayer was so important. So prayer, what I find with prayer is it's transformational, and the power of it is that it includes our humanity. Sometimes in this transcendent, vast, oceanic love and joy, and when you feel it, you don't feel your humanity. We don't say this much anymore, but in New Thought, they used to say, you're in that place, the divine doesn't even know that you're sad or upset because it's in this perfect place where everything is perfect. It only sees perfection. It never sees imperfection. It doesn't see your humanity. And I'm like, I'm not interested in a God that can't see my humanity. In fact, I just read that in this book. It's amazing. St. Francis, he was not interested. He said the part that grabbed him was the God that was part of humanity, that knew that there was pain on this earth and cared profoundly and loved even more deeply who we are. It didn't separate and transcend. It wasn't so vast and oceanic and free and unlimited that it didn't know what was happening here in this beautiful earth form. And to me, prayer is that beautiful mixture of the transcendent and the human. And there's something that I feel like my heart's involved. I feel like my body's involved. I feel like the whole human experience is involved in the prayer. And there's a communion of the two becoming one, but not one where there's no humanity, but the one where the humanity is fully alive in the spiritual essence. We can't speak of it because it's paradoxical, because it's non-linear, it's transcendent, and yet the most beautiful. One of the things listening to these monks, they talk all the time about you're not really in prayer if there are times where you just don't dissolve into tears from love, from care, from compassion. Because prayer is a place that just opens your heart into infinity. That's what I can get behind. And so we are a house of prayer. And so we have this incredible prayer team, and all of us are prayers. If you're here, you're drawn by prayer. So as we're going through the Lord's Prayer for these next few weeks, recognizing that as you're co-creating this for yourself, a prayer, that this is the thing about the Lord's Prayer is it's a prayer of transformation. It is a prayer about transformation. And so we're looking at it from that place, and that you're the authority, okay? I say that because I put out on the minister's listserv about prayer, and I got so much incredible stuff. So I spent this week reading all these different things that people were sending me and it was all amazing, but it started to get too heady for me, and I lost my heart. So check with your heart first. There are a ton, I had no idea there was so much written about the Lord's Prayer. I've never spent so much time reading about it. When I rewrote my version, I didn't study or research it. It just came from within me. I'm not sure how it came, the words came for you, but it just comes from within you. But there's a ton out there. It's all really interesting, but just connect with yourself. So you ready to begin? Yes. Finally? The introductory part is over. So we're just going to go for the first part, just the very first line, and then the rest of the 3 weeks we'll go through the rest of the prayer. So the first word is our. It's an amazing thing to know that the Lord's Prayer is spoken in all it's a Christian prayer spoken in Christian religion, but these Christian religions not only have minor theological differences between Lutheran and Presbyterian and Methodists and all the different versions, but now in our very divisive world, it's gotten even further apart. You have the very conservative Christians who have conservative cultural and political views as well, and you have the liberal Christians who also have liberal Christian cultural and political views. So it even feels more divisive. And so to me, as I was thinking about that, there's like nothing more miraculous that as wide apart as these communities are, all of them say the Lord's Prayer every Sunday. I'm like, wow, that just hit me this weekend. Every one of them, what brings them together, the one thing that unifies them is the hour. And so I was recognizing that on our listserv. I was saying, we don't have anything that's an hour because we are individualists, darn it. Like we're about to go through the Lord's Prayer and create our own prayer. No one's going to tell us what to say. And I'm that way too. Like I have my own wording, or that line doesn't work for me in that reading, or that song, that line didn't work for me. And we get all wound up. So we're going to create this prayer for ourselves. So we're going to leave the hour out, but I have a very strong intention for our community to come up with a prayer that is an hour. My prayer team the Lighthouse prayer team does not know that this is a project that we have for this year, is to create a prayer of hour that we can say every week as a community, because I think the power of hour is really moving and beautiful for all of us. So for now, though, we're just going to stick with skipping that word. You can say my or our, but when I made mine, I had to think about that, and I thought, well, am I being exclusive, not saying our? Am I leaving out the world? But then I thought, well, I can't pray for the whole world. They might not want me to pray them this way. So I just left that out. So the first part we're going to deal with today is, I have to remember the original, Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So Father, and it's a holy name. That's sort of that phrase, and it's in heaven. So there's different aspects of this. We can go into it, but this is the only reason why we're going into it is not to become scholars of the Lord's Prayer. There's a lot of that out there, but just to think about this for yourself. If you are going to start a prayer that you felt was holy and sacred, do you have holy words that you use like Michelle used, divine beloved? Is there a name that you have that evokes sacredness and holiness? But there's another part that says, who art in heaven. It's transcendent. Today in this world, we don't really use Mother and Father God much because we get it confused with our own mothers and fathers. It's not, we recognize, that can sometimes seem limiting. So often, especially in Centers for Spiritual Living, our recognition statement of our treatment is like a declaration of what God is, a descriptor. So you might not just have one word. You might, I have some examples, but I don't have any of this because I couldn't find it again this morning. But there are some people who've written the Lord's Prayer just sort of that first part as a descriptor of what the divine is, the divine presence is. So you describe, it is, what did you say? It loves everything. It's who art everywhere, and it loves everything. I like source. It's the freedom, the joy, whatever those words are for you. But spend time on it. Listen to your heart. What is it that evokes? It is transcendent. So it's not just immanent. It is transcendent. It is the vastness, the infinite nature of the cosmos, and yet is as intimate as the Father. There were a couple of people who are writing about the Lord's Prayer that point out that Jesus did not say Yahweh or Elohim, which is creator. He called it Abba. It was so personal and intimate. He used a personal, intimate name in this prayer. Do you have a name or names that you could use that are both bring a sense of awe, that bring a sense of much bigger than me, Harriet. It's like my friend who, when they in jail, they said the Lord's Prayer because they knew it was speaking to something much greater than them at that moment, because they knew they needed something bigger. So it's a name that you know that evokes something that's bigger than you. So, because sometimes even when we use I am, we get confused and think it's our ego I am. It's hard sometimes to differentiate. So a name that evokes both the transcendent and the intimacy of the moment. So these are just things to think about as you're thinking about your own version of the Lord's Prayer this week, okay? Transcendent and intimate, something that opens your heart, something that you want to give yourself to, that you automatically love. When you hear these words, you just say, yes, this is the source of my life. It is the source of everything that I have ever been and ever will be on this planet and all life to come. This is my source. That is compelling and transformative in that one statement. I do remember Emmett Fox said, in his view, that word Father encompassed a whole theology. And then he went on to say what that theology is. We're not going to go there. But it's important, this word, this holy name, this sacred name that is heaven and yet intimate to us. So we're beginning with that. This week I'm inviting you to look at your past, just get a check in with your subconscious mind about any stuff that you just want to be conscious about, good and bad, or neutral. I had a lot of neutrality. I just didn't have a lot of stuff on it one way or the other. Good, bad, neutral. Just check in, and then begin this week with your first line of the prayer. That's equal to, I can always forget the original version. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed, which is holy, hallowed be thy name. Okay? So your version of that, check in with your heart, check in with your soul, check in with your mind, check in with your body, and create something beautiful. So I have these 3 different versions that other people have written. They all do use the parenting language. So it's just to get the motors going for you. I'm going to use these same 3 translations throughout the series just to give different ideas. And I will find one that just uses impersonal words, because there's those 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the 3 different versions, and then I'm just going to go straight into prayer after that. Okay, Jack? Okay. They're not long. So the first one is by Emma Curtis Hawkins, who's considered the teacher of teachers in New Thought. And it's very simple, simplicity is beautiful too. She wrote, Father, Mother, God within, holy is your name. Father, Mother, God within, holy is your name. The next is from Neil Douglas Klotz. Is anyone familiar with him? I'll tell you more about him. He's an interesting guy. So this is from Aramaic, and I want to say something about that because you'll hear a lot about this if you start looking it up. There's a lot of people say, Jesus spoke Aramaic, this is what you would have heard so this is the translation of Aramaic, and I have studied with an Aramaic teacher who taught, and Lamsa Bible, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Lamsa Bible, and so he was a student of Lamsa, and I'm reading other Aramaic versions, I'm like, that's not what he said, and oh wait, that's different. It's like the Bhagavad Gita, there's no such thing as a direct translation, and so it's all sort of interpretive, and the reason why I like Neil Douglas Klotz is he says that. He says there's no the translation from Aramaic. This is a nuanced translation of Aramaic, but it's beautiful, and I love it, so I just wanted to share it. Our Father, Mother of the cosmos, birther of all radiance and vibration. So he was evoking holy through birther of all radiance and vibration. Our Father, Mother of the cosmos, birther of all radiance and vibration. That's how he begins the prayer. And then there's a Lutheran minister, some of you may have heard of. Let me know if you've heard of her, Nadia Bolz-Weber. Michelle's heard of her? Okay, she's a little out there, but I love her. This is a little longer. So when I'm done with it, I'll just take a pause and then I'll go into prayer. Okay, Jack? Okay. Our Father, our Mother, our Holy Parent, the source of all being, from whom we came and to whom we return. You who knows us better than we know ourselves. Jesus called you Abba, and so shall we, even as we may have an ambiguous relationship with parenthood. Be to us, Holy Parent, the one who loves us without condition. And what an honor and joy it is to be in prayer with all of you this beautiful, radiant morning of light and love. As we come together recognizing that this presence is that which loves us without condition. It loves every one of us all of the time, in every place, in every circumstance, in every condition, all beings on this planet, in the cosmos. It loves. It loves because it is its nature to always love. It is its nature to create and to bring back to itself in love. It is its nature to love all that it has created and to celebrate it and to care for it and to heal that which feels separate and apart and is in pain and in suffering. This presence of love never stops. It never diminishes. It never withholds. It never hesitates. It is always, in every moment of time and space, pouring its unconditional love in, through, and as all creation, all of the time. And this love is the very nature that makes up myself and all of us. We are made in, through, and as this unlimited, unbounded love. We see with the heart of love. We feel with the heart of love. We understand and know with the heart of love. We feel it in our mind, in our body, and we feel it deeply and profoundly in our soul, this love of which we were birthed into and from and as, and we continue to grow and evolve as this love and become more and more a transparency of this pure, unlimited, unbounded love pouring through and as us in tenderness, in mercy, in grace, in wisdom, in clarity, in justice, in all forms, in all ways. Love is on the field in our lives, in our physical health, in our emotional health, in our mental health, in our energy body, in our mental body, on every level. Love has its way. We are that love here and now. We hold and know this for our deepest relationships of intimacy with friends, with family, with siblings, with children, with parents, with our communities, with our country, with this world, with animals, with plants, with nature and the environment, with the galaxies upon galaxies of stars. Our love envelops it all. For our love is God's love here and now. And in this love, we are made whole and holy. And we feel our wholeness and our holiness, and we just say thank you, thank you, thank you, divine infinite one. And we let this word be now, knowing that as this word has been spoken, it was fulfilled long ago. In deep abiding gratitude, we let it be as we say together, and so it is.
I walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all